Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. This is the all-new DeWalt DCF870, and we've gotten a lot of requests for testing one of these in the comments, so here it is. It's their first ever hydraulic quiet style impact driver, and honestly, the absolute amount of torque it makes is probably not all that important if you're looking at one of these. So mainly what we're interested in today is how does it compare against this Milwaukee M18 Surge hydraulic impact driver, a common go-to in this category that DeWalt's trying to enter, when it comes to sure, yeah, torque, but also things like driving speed, sound level, and with the help of our high-speed camera, we also look at vibration and where these differences come from. Of course, what we do on this channel is just a small piece of the puzzle, so we always recommend, and especially for tools like this, to look at other channels and sources of information as well. So here it is, DeWalt's new tiny impact driver, which comes in with it a not so small price tag of $199 for an impact driver, something that only in 2024, 2025 is a normal thing to be able to say. But what isn't large is its size, something DeWalt's been pulling off quite well with their atomic line. This is labeled their XR. I wouldn't spend too much time trying to understand their spider web of tool lines, but yeah, it's short. The cheaper, often found for around $150 Milwaukee measures in at 5 inches. That's not bad. The DCF870 comes in at under 4, 3.96, 3.97, and you'd think the narrow body of the Milwaukee might be a lighter overall tool, but they also weigh about the same too. The DeWalt really leveraging that short length to make that possible, which makes it the same length as their $50 cheaper DCF850, that tiny firecracker of an impact driver, but instead this one's filled up with hydraulic juices. These, instead of old-fashioned sprung hammer mechanisms hitting away, use hydraulic impulses to accomplish the same thing, but ideally with much less harsh to the ear's experience, and many say more control and less vibration as well. So let's take a look at that first. Measured from 1 meter away and hammering on a tool test you'll see coming up, the Milwaukee M18 Surge puts out about 92.1 to 92.5 dBA, which is pretty good. We get around 96 plus with most traditional impact drivers, which with this logarithmic scale of decibels is a lot louder. The new DCF870 sees typically 92.3 to 92.9 decibel. Both of these tools will peak around 92.9, but most of the time impacting, we see the DeWalt is a little bit louder on average. We measure this as an average of 92.3 and 92.6, which on the logarithmic scale is a 6% difference. They're awarded 50 points, which is best here, and the DeWalt receiving 47. Future tools that are louder will receive less, quieter will inherit that 50-point max. Let's take a look at torque. Our first test is called working torque. It's a 5-second run and forward. Here's the Milwaukee 2760 Surge up first. $39 foot-pounds. Yeah, that's not a lot. We tried this back to back and in between DeWalt runs, same deal. No one would call these tools torque monsters anyways, but maybe that's old thinking and this DeWalt has come to redefine things. Here's the new 870 hydraulic. Let's see it. $96 foot-pounds. I don't remember the last time I got excited about 90-something foot-pounds, but that's a lot. Good enough to pass up around 9 to 10 traditional impact drivers we've tested in the past. If you have the rankings, you can now plug that into this interactive chart and play around and see that if you want. It's pretty crazy though. Let's head on over to reverse and see how they do. The Milwaukee seemingly likes reverse for some reason, as in by 5 seconds, it's already making 15, 18 foot-pounds more than in forward for whatever reason. We tested this back and forth and got the same results each time. It is strange, but also interesting. Here's the new DeWalt. $77 foot-pounds and a lot closer to the Milwaukee now, or maybe Milwaukee is now catching up with more impacting. We also find on tools of this size, hydraulic being no exception here, battery selection can make little peak difference. For example, the DeWalt here with their new 8 amp hour power pack, it's going to see gains on the curve from getting there faster, but ultimately end up in the same spot. Smaller stuff will likely be driven in faster from your own experience and testing you'll see elsewhere when the task requires well under peak torque, but peak torque itself is not really all that improved. With that in mind, one thing we wanted to be sure to look at is driving speed with standardized 5 amp hour packs to compare. Some impacts excel at this due to things like impacts per minute, some just through sheer grunt. This is driving 1/2-inch nylon lock nuts down all thread until an 8-inch deep socket bottoms out. Here's the Surge up first. 20.7 seconds. It feels like it took some time to do that, but in its defense, that beats a lot of older gen Milwaukee stuff like this M12 brush model, which took a full 35 seconds, so not all that bad in the scheme of things. And here's the new DCF870. .06 seconds. Not only is that trouncing on the Surge, that beats most of the traditional impact drivers we've done on this test so far. Not all of them, but more than half of them. That's pretty impressive. Now, a lot of people had high hopes for this 870 because they saw figures like 4,200 IPM, which beats the 4,000 impacts per minute of the Milwaukee. But we have to keep in mind, we're not talking about a literal hammer here. We're talking fluid impulses, the amount of fluid being displaced or the peak PSI that it's reaching with each of those impulses could range massively, perhaps to the point where it beats the driving performance of old school hammers in the future. To that point, we'd like to take a look at how these things look like slowed way down with the help of our 10,000 frames per second high-speed camera. For one, because this is just really cool. This is about as stable and level an impact as we've ever filmed going full tilt. It's not moving around all that much. You can see impulses though travel down the length of the bit and then the screw, slightly delayed in that transmission, and then also back here into the hand. And also notice how watching that Milwaukee logo rotate here, it takes around 10 to 11 hits to make a full rotation. That is a lot of hits. Now we take a look at DeWALT. First thing you're going to notice here is the screw is now only taking 3, sometimes 4 hits to rotate fully. IPM is cool, but imagine having to use 3 times fewer hits to drive the screw in, and then remembering this tool is also hitting 200 IPM faster on top of that. This is how you get a 7-second versus a 20-second driving speed test. With those more meaningful impulses, you do get a little bit, more vibration. You can see this forward reverse switch shaking about, and then compare that to the Milwaukee. You can also see that felt into the hand here more so as well. In person, I'd say this is less dramatic than it looks, like most things in high speed. Essentially, the more difficult the task, especially in reverse here on the dyno, the DeWalt, on this large bolt, the difference is noticeable. It jiggles around a lot. Driving screws up to medium and small size, it's harder and harder to distinguish a large difference between models. Both are noticeably smoother than a traditional impact, especially compared to most DeWalt examples, which are usually pretty rough in general. The Milwaukee has a finer impacting resolution for very delicate work because, as you saw, each of those blows result in less progress. But looking at these both, you sort of can be able to tell in practice one is going to be able to do not a lot much more than the other when it comes to the jobs you need to do, and neither tax you all that much for it. This is the torque test channel though. One final test, their forward max torque, 10 seconds, and boy, it's a doozy. Yes, that's not a typo. 120 foot-pounds is measured versus just 49 of those. The Milwaukee, for some reason, compares closer in reverse, but in forward, we couldn't get it past 49. We ran 5 tests on each tool for each one of these testing series, because hydraulic impacts, we found in the past, like to be warmed up before testing and then eventually do have a drop off as well. So you're shown their median runs. Typical runs for the M18 would often see 45. It is a trouncing, folks. It's not close. Let's see just how not close it looks on the new hydraulic driver impact ranking, which we can add to if you guys like. Hopefully something new comes out to rival this tiny new yellow guy. Their torque runs are divided by 5 on our impact driver rankings. And then for the speed test, the DeWalt gets top marks for 50 points here, like the Milwaukee did for its sound level, but the M18 gets just 17.1 points. As a portion of this, 50 the top score for how long it took to drive the same task. Then as a function of their power and length, the amount of space you can fit it in between some 2x4s, that's 14.2 points and 26.7 points. Then finally, as a function of all those scores, sound level, torque, driving speed, and size compared to their price, that's 37.5 and 45.8 points. I'm not saying this is a low cost for an impact driver, it's $200, but within this crowd, it is a lot of tool per dollar, it would appear. That totals 150.8 and 227.5, placing the new 870 in very solidly into first place with a large gap to what we figured would have been the best shot at giving it a run for its money, the Milwaukee, at just 150.8 points. Sure, it hasn't proven itself on the job site for many years like the red tool has, and this vibration difference is sometimes noticeable. But if the M18 was making impactful enough hits to, for example, turn this screw around in just 3 to 4 blows instead of needing 10 to 11 to do the same, it might feel a bit different as well. So we expect any future competition that wants to take DeWALT's lunch money to feel at least this lively when driving in fasteners. Much larger difference than we expected to see today. Hydraulic impacts, after all, are a much younger in technology sort of tool, so we could be in an age where quieter tools take over the job site in coming years with less and less performance difference on the table to give up. Appreciate you joining us for this one. We make episodes every Friday. Click some stuff below if you want to be shown those sometimes, and thanks for watching.